Good evening. Happy Sunday night to you, or Monday morning, depending on when you are watching this or listening to this video. We started going through Genesis last week. I think it was last week after we finished the book of Acts, the first book of church history, and now we come to the book of Genesis. And starting last week in these short video devotions, I want to reiterate once again that my goal is not to preach a long message or go through a long Bible study on Genesis. There's much more that could be said about each one of these chapters, for that matter, each one of these verses, diving into the different type of writing style Moses used writing Genesis and the different type of history of the book of Acts and theology. Acts really is more church history. The theology comes in Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Hebrews, Romans. There's other books. There's certainly theology in Genesis, and we certainly see in Genesis chapters 1 through 2, it almost seems like an attack on a lot of the Egyptian gods, the Egyptian false deities, false gods, and there's background in all these books. You get into Joshua, Judges. I was watching a video earlier today. They were all little city-states that were actually ruled by Egypt. 7-minute seminary through Seedbed, some of those are, if not all of them, are through Asbury Theological Seminary. Had a video about that. When Joshua came in, they were really freeing the different cities from the rule of Egypt, which is an interesting thought. So there's always extra background, but the goal here is just to read scripture with a few extra comments to help your devotion life and your time with the Lord. In Genesis chapter 6 and Genesis chapter 7, we go through the flood. We see why the flood happened, and then the flood in Genesis chapter 7. Now we come to Genesis 8. The flood subsides. But God remembered Noah. And all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Even back then they knew that wind dries up the ground. Wind pushes the water to different places and so on, sends it back to its streams, its creeks, its reservoirs. The water subsided. Verse 2. Also, the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained. Remember, it said things of the nature that the water came up from under the ground too. And the water receded steadily from the earth. And at the end of 150 days, the water decreased. 150 days. After 40 days of rain and 40 nights of rain. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. Sometimes we're looking for the ark on Mount Ararat. It says mountains, plural, of Ararat. The water decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. And it came about at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. It seems like this is 40 more days after the 150 days. And he sent out a raven, and it flew here and there until the water was dried up from the earth. Then he sent out a dove from him to see if the water was abated from the face of the land. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, so she returned to him into the ark, for the water was on the surface of all the earth. Then he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark to himself. So he waited yet another 7 days, and again he sent out the dove from the ark. The dove came to him toward evening, and behold, in her beak was a freshly picked olive leaf. So no one knew that the water was abated from the earth. Then he waited yet another 7 days, and he sent out the dove, but she did not return to him again. Now it came about in the 601st year, in the 1st month, on the 1st of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. Then Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you. So now the Lord speaks again, by the way. It's been a while since the Lord has spoken to him. But now the Lord speaks to him, telling him it's okay to go out. Verse 17, Bring out with you every living thing of all the flesh as with you, birds and animals, and every creeping thing that creeps out on the earth, that they may breed abundantly on the earth, and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife, and his sons' wives with him. Every beast of every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth, went out by their families from the ark. Then Noah, verse 20, Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. The Lord smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, I will never again curse the ground on account of man. For the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth, and I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. They call this the Noahic I might have mispronounced that covenant. It's the covenant with Noah. The Lord makes a covenant with Noah, and there's a sign of the covenant. While the earth remains seed time and harvest and cold and heat and summer and winter and day and night shall not cease. And in chapter 9, which we'll get into tomorrow night, Tuesday night, tomorrow night or Tuesday morning, there's a covenant of the rainbow. And that's the covenant of showing that the Lord will never again curse the ground and curse the earth like this. That's the end of the flood, well, almost into the flood narrative. We're going to read more about Noah tomorrow night or Tuesday morning. Have a great night, a great day. Happy Monday, and the Lord, depending when you watch this. God bless.